have a serial killer living in the streets and roads around the Jack the Stripper murders, because we know Harold Jones is living there. There's no such thing in my experience in dealing with serial killers as coincidence.
1921, a Welsh town throws a teenage boy a parade, cheering crowds. A gold watch, a hero who just beat a murder charge in court. 17 days later, police climbed into his attic. What they find on those rafters will turn the whole celebration into a nightmare. Here are 9 of the most disturbing discoveries inside child serial killers' homes.
I think we've got to look at Harold Jones as being the beginnings of the public's understanding that children can kill.
June 1921, the streets of Abertillery, Wales are packed. People are singing, a brass band is playing, and in the middle of it all stands a 15-year-old boy being carried like a champion. His name is Harold Jones. Weeks earlier, police charged him with murdering a girl named Frida Burnell. The girl had gone to run a small errand and never came home. She was found the next morning, and the trail led straight to the seed shop where Harold worked. But the town didn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. Harold was polite. He was helpful. He was a local boy everyone liked. The evidence against him was thin, and a teenager with a clean reputation made a sympathetic figure. So when the jury found him not guilty, the whole community didn't just feel relief, they threw a party. They gave him a hero's welcome, a brass band, a street celebration. Someone even handed him a gold watch to mark his innocence. Here's the thing, they had just thrown a parade for a killer. 17 days later, a girl named Florence Little vanished. Same town, same quiet streets. Panic set in fast because everyone remembered Frida. The whole community turned out to search. And as part of that search, a superintendent and a constable knocked on the door of 10 Darren Road, the Jones family home. Harold's father, proud of his cleared son, let them right in. Then the constable noticed something. The trapdoor to the attic had a stain on it. Someone had tried to scrub it clean. They hadn't quite managed. The officers climbed up. What they found in that attic ended any doubt about who Harold Jones really was. Florence was up there, hidden across the rafters of his own family's home. But the attic was only the start. Downstairs, the search turned up the weapon, a small pocket knife that belonged to Harold's father. They found a plank of wood, more than 1.5 feet long, hidden underneath the family boiler. And tucked beneath the kitchen sink sat a small saucepan, the kind you'd boil an egg in, filled with a mixture of water and blood. Harold hadn't just killed inside his home. He'd used the house like a workshop and tried to clean up after himself. When the officers came back down and told his father what was upstairs, the man didn't argue. He didn't beg. He walked out of his own house, found his son in the street, and made a citizen's arrest on his own boy. Harold confessed to both girls. He admitted he'd killed Frida too, the crime a jury had just cleared him of. He later told a prison chaplain something that still chills investigators today, that he simply had a desire to kill. There was no robbery, no revenge, no reason a normal mind could follow. Just the urge. He was too young to hang. So he was locked away at His Majesty's pleasure and finally released in 1941 as a grown man. He died of cancer in 1971. And for decades afterward, some writers wondered if he ever truly stopped. A few even tried to link him to a series of unsolved killings years later. None of it was ever proven. But that's a story for another video.
We now know that Daniel Bartland planned to kill his mum. He then executed the killing in a violent attack on her, and then he took a number of steps to try and cover this up by both burning her body and then lying consistently throughout the police investigation.
Most killers try to hide what they did. This next one wrote the script before he did it. Literally. April 2011, firefighters raced to a house in Nottinghamshire, England. A 14-year-old boy named Daniel Bartlam tells them an intruder attacked his mother and set the place on fire. He says he saved his little brother and the family dog. He plays the survivor, the traumatized kid who escaped a monster. There was no intruder. The truth started to unravel in the autopsy room. The pathologist found that Daniel's mother had died before the fire ever started. The flames weren't the murder, they were the cover-up. Someone had killed her first, then tried to burn the evidence and blame a stranger who never existed. And the more police looked at the scene, the more Daniel's story fell apart. The injuries didn't match a fire. The timeline didn't match an intruder. So police took Daniel's computer, standard procedure. They didn't expect it to hand them the entire case. That's where this goes from a tragic house fire to something genuinely disturbing. On the hard drive, detectives recovered a story Daniel had written, a screenplay. The main character was named Daniel Bartlam, and in that script, the character murders his own mother in almost exactly the way Daniel's real mother had been killed. The fiction and the crime lined up far too closely to be coincidence. He'd even written a credit line for his fictional self, describing the character as the longest-serving male on a soap opera, born in 1994 and dying in 2047. He wasn't just fantasizing about it. He was casting himself as the star of the murder and writing his own legend around it. There was more. His search history read like a how-to guide for getting away with it. He'd looked up how to get away with murder. He'd searched for characters who escape punishment in TV shows. He'd been watching clips of a soap opera villain attacking a woman, studying it. This wasn't a snap. This was rehearsal. In court, Daniel's defense argued he lost control. The jury didn't buy it. The screenplay proved he'd been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. They convicted him of murder. He got a life sentence with a minimum of 16 years. A 14-year-old wrote the ending of his mother's life into a movie. Then he made it real. And the thing that put him away wasn't a witness or a fingerprint. It was his own writing, sitting in a deleted file he thought no one would ever read.
So he put some poison in the Sunday joint, not eat that bit himself, watch what it did to his father, his stepmother, his sister, and make notes.
Now picture a teenager's bedroom, a workspace really, and under the bed, a notebook that wasn't a diary at all. It was a kill log. Graham Young grew up in England obsessed with two things: poison and the Nazis. By the time he was 14, that obsession had stopped being theoretical. His stepmother died. Members of his family and his school friends started getting violently sick for reasons no one could explain. Graham was poisoning them, antimony, thallium. He'd talk his way into pharmacies, claiming the chemicals were for experiments, and he kept careful track of what he gave to whom. He was caught as a boy and sent to Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital that usually held the most dangerous adult offenders in the country. He was the youngest patient admitted there in decades. Doctors treated him for years. He seemed to improve. He told them all the right things. Eventually, they decided he was no longer a danger. In 1971, they let him out. That was a mistake, a fatal one. Young got a job in a storeroom at a photographic supply company. He had access to chemicals again and access to people. Soon, his coworkers started falling ill. Nausea, pain, a creeping weakness no doctor could explain. They called it the Bovingdon bug, some mystery sickness going around the office. 2 men died from it. What gave him away was his own arrogance. When a company doctor was puzzled by the illnesses, Young couldn't help himself. He started lecturing the doctor about the exact symptoms of thallium poisoning, showing off knowledge no storeroom clerk should have. The doctor got suspicious and called police, and when they searched his room, they understood what they were dealing with. Under his bed sat a diary, but it didn't record feelings or dreams. It recorded doses. For each person he'd poisoned, Young had logged how much he gave them, what symptoms it caused, and his cold decision about whether they would live or die. He'd even noted a plan to finish off one victim in his hospital bed. He treated human beings like lab subjects, and he kept the data. His room was also covered in Nazi paraphernalia, swastikas, photos of Nazi figures, a teenage shrine to mass murder that he never grew out of. At trial, Young claimed the diary was just notes for a novel he was writing. The jury saw it for what it was, He got 4 life sentences and died in prison in 1990. 2 of his fatal poisonings happened when he was an adult, but his career started in that bedroom as a 14-year-old keeping score. If Graham Young kept records, this next boy kept trophies. And his own father found the first warning sign years before anyone died. Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the early 1900s. A boy named Cayetano Santos Godino was different in a way that scared the people around him. The neighborhood gave him a cruel nickname, El Petiso Orejudo, roughly the big-eared runt. One day his father caught him strangling the family's chickens. Disturbed, the man searched his son's room. Under the bed he found a box. Inside that box were dead birds. Not one, a collection. Godino had been killing small animals and keeping them, the way a child might keep marbles or stamps. His father had no idea what that box really meant. Looking back, it was a preview. Over several years, Godino moved from animals to people. He attacked the most defenseless victims he could find, very young children, and he felt nothing about it. He set fires around the city. He hurt and killed, and when doctors later asked him if he felt sorry, he didn't understand the question. He told them flatly that he enjoyed it. There was no guilt to find because there was none there. His final crime was the one that exposed him. He killed a small boy, and then he did something almost no one could believe. He went to the child's wake. He walked into the home of the grieving family and stood among them, calm, blending in, just to check on the body one last time. Most killers run. He showed up to admire his work. 2 investigators at that funeral noticed him. Something about the strange boy lingering near the coffin felt deeply wrong. They started pulling at the thread, connecting him to the string of unsolved attacks across the city. The pieces fit. December 1912, police raided his family home at dawn. When they searched him, they found a length of cord in his pocket, the kind he used on his victims. And alongside it, a newspaper clipping. The clipping was about one of his own murders. He was carrying the press coverage of his crime like a souvenir. Godino was declared insane and locked away. He was eventually sent to a prison at the very southern tip of the continent, a place so remote they called it the prison at the end of the world. He died there in 1944. The box of birds under the bed had told the whole story. Everyone just learned to read it too late. Cross the ocean and go back even further to one of the youngest killers in American history. They called him the Boy Fiend, and the most haunting discovery in his case came after he was already behind bars. Boston, 1874. A 14-year-old named Jesse Pomeroy was a strange and frightening figure even to adults. He had a physical difference, a clouded eye that made him stand out, and a reputation that made parents pull their kids indoors. He'd already spent time in a reform school for luring and attacking other children. He was released early for good behavior. Within months of getting out, the killing started. A boy named Horace Millen was found dead. Police suspected Pomeroy almost immediately. He was the boy with the eye, the one the reform school had just let go. The clincher was physical evidence. Investigators had taken casts of boot prints near where Millen's body was found. Those prints matched Jesse's boots exactly. He confessed, then tried to take it back. It didn't matter. The case against him was already solid. But there was a second child still missing. A girl named Katie Curran had disappeared weeks earlier. Her family had no answers, and the trail had gone cold. Then the scandal caught up with Jesse's mother. She ran a small dress shop, and once her son became the most infamous boy in Boston, the business was finished. She sold it. New tenants moved in and started cleaning the place out. When they got to the cellar, they found Katie. She had been hidden down there the whole time, in the basement of the very shop where Jesse worked, concealed under a pile of ash, tucked out of sight, in a building his own family used every single day. Think about that. While the entire city searched for a missing little girl, while her family begged for answers, she had been in the cellar beneath the Pomeroy storefront. Jesse had walked past the spot every day and said nothing. Jesse Pomeroy was convicted and sentenced to death. Because of his age, that sentence was eventually reduced. But the alternative was almost crueler. He was locked in solitary confinement, alone, and he stayed there for roughly 4 decades. No visitors to speak of, no company. He grew from a teenager into an old man inside a single cell. He died in prison in 1932, having spent most of his life in near total isolation. A whole city looked for that little girl. The answer was in the basement the family swept every morning.
She had such a heavy dark fringe in the blue eyes, the piercing eyes. She would stay, and it's just like got fixed on you, you know it. You knew you were in for trouble.
So far, we've seen bodies, diaries, and trophies. This next discovery was just a child's drawing in a school exercise book, and it proved a 10-year-old was a killer. Newcastle, England, 1968. 2 little boys died within weeks of each other. At first, the deaths were a mystery. The neighborhood was frightened. Nobody wanted to believe what the evidence was starting to suggest, that the person responsible was a child herself. Her name was Mary Bell. She was 10 years old. Mary and another girl had been acting strangely around the investigation. Mary seemed to know details about the deaths that hadn't been made public. She talked about things she shouldn't have known. But suspicion isn't proof, especially against a child. Then her teacher made a discovery. Going through Mary's school exercise books, the teacher found a drawing. It showed a child lying on the ground in a very specific position, with a small figure of a workman nearby and an object beside the body. The problem was that the scene in the drawing matched the real death scene almost exactly, down to details the police had deliberately kept secret. There was no way for Mary to have drawn that unless she had been there. A crayon picture in a kid's notebook placed her at the scene of a killing. There was more. Before the second death, Mary and her friend had broken into a nursery and left notes behind. Scrawled, misspelled confessions, written in a child's hand, admitting to a murder and almost daring someone to do something about it. One of them said the writer killed so they could come back and do it again. The adults who found them at the time assumed it was a sick prank by some local kids. They threw them away. They had no idea they were holding a genuine confession to a killing that had already happened, written by the killer. Mary Bell was convicted of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. She became one of the most infamous child killers in British history. She was eventually released as a young woman and given lifelong anonymity by the courts. A legal order so unusual, it was later named after her. It still protects her identity today. She left a confession in 2 places, a break-in note and a drawing in her own school book. Both were sitting in plain sight.
The girls' team says they are continuing to assess her and stress that any reintegration will be done in baby steps, starting with walks around the facility, going into other buildings in the facility before going out into the Edmonton community.
Sometimes the discovery isn't hidden at all. It's in a school locker, drawn in stick figures, by a girl everyone assumed was a victim. Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada, 2006. A 12-year-old girl named Jasmine Richardson went missing the same night her family was attacked in their home. Her mother, her father, and her brother were all killed. When police arrived, the scene was devastating, and one family member was gone. Jasmine. The natural assumption was the worst one, that whoever murdered the family had taken the daughter too. So they treated her as a possible kidnapping victim. They put out alerts. They searched for any clue to find her before it was too late. And part of that search led them to the most ordinary place imaginable, her school locker. What they found there flipped the entire investigation upside down. Inside the locker was a drawing, a simple stick figure drawing, the kind any 12-year-old might make. But the scene it showed wasn't ordinary at all. It depicted a girl setting a house on fire with her family trapped inside, while she ran toward a vehicle and the boy she was dating. It wasn't a doodle. It was a blueprint of almost exactly what had just happened to her family the night before. Jasmine wasn't a victim. She was a planner, and the plan had been sitting in her locker the whole time. The investigation revealed she'd plotted the murders with her 23-year-old boyfriend. He carried out the attack on her parents. Jasmine is believed to have been responsible for her younger brother. The two of them fled together. The next day, police found the pair in another town and arrested them both. The missing girl everyone was trying to rescue was sitting beside the man who helped kill her family. Because of her age, Jasmine became the youngest person in Canada ever convicted of multiple counts of first-degree murder. She received the maximum sentence the law allowed for someone her age, 10 years. She completed that sentence in 2016. Under Canadian law protecting young offenders, much of her case remained sealed, and for years, she could only be identified in the press by her initials. Police opened a missing girl's locker, hoping to save her. Instead, they found her confession drawn in stick figures.
Now for background, this was a murder in England more than 3 decades ago that shocked the world. James Bulger was snatched from his mum inside a Liverpool shopping centre by a pair of 10-year-old boys before he was tortured and beaten to death.
This next case is one of the most infamous in British history, and it was cracked by something as small as a smear of paint and a pair of children's shoes. England, 1993. A 2-year-old boy named James Bulger was taken from a shopping centre while his mother's back was turned for a moment. Security cameras caught grainy footage of the toddler being led away by 2 older boys. The whole country watched that footage in horror. The 2 boys were Robert Thompson and John Venables. They were both 10 years old. They walked the little boy more than 2 miles through a busy area, past dozens of people who saw 2 boys with a crying toddler and assumed they were brothers taking him home. What happened at the end of that walk was one of the most shocking crimes the UK had ever recorded. The boys left James near a railway line and tried to stage it to look like an accident. At first, there was no clear suspect. 2 children abducting and killing another child was almost unthinkable, the kind of thing investigators didn't even want to consider. The case relied on that blurry security footage and an anonymous tip. Someone looked at the grainy image on the news, recognized one of the boys, and picked up the phone. That single call sent police to 2 ordinary homes on 2 ordinary streets, and it was the forensic search of those homes that turned suspicion into proof. On Venables' clothing, investigators found blue modeling paint, the same paint that had been thrown at James during the attack. On Thompson's shoes, they found the victim's blood. A forensic scientist later testified that one mark on the clothing might even have been a small handprint. Tiny traces carried home on the clothes of 2 10-year-olds became the physical evidence that tied them both to the crime they thought they'd staged perfectly. Both boys were convicted, the youngest convicted killers in modern British history. They served time in custody, were released as adults, and were given brand new identities to protect them from public retaliation. Venables has since been sent back to prison more than once for other serious offenses. 2 children walked home that day with the evidence still on their clothes. They just didn't think anyone would ever look. Our last case is the most unsettling in one specific way. It involves the youngest hand on this entire list, and the records around it are thin, so we'll tell you only what's been reported and where the gaps are. Bihar, India, around 2006 and 2007. In a poor rural village, infants began to die. 3 of them over a span of time, a cousin, a baby sister, and finally a neighbor's child. The person responsible was a boy from the same family. He was around 7 or 8 years old. The first 2 deaths were kept quiet, treated by the family as private tragedies, hidden away rather than reported. In a small village with little outside attention, the deaths didn't trigger an investigation. The bodies were concealed near the family's home and the surrounding area. It was the 3rd death that finally broke it open. When the neighbor's baby went missing, suspicion fell on the boy almost at once. The villagers confronted him. And what happened next is the detail that stuck with everyone who later reported on the case. He confessed. Calmly. By some accounts, almost cheerfully. As if he'd been asked about something completely trivial. And then he simply walked the villagers to where the child's body was. No fear, no tears, no sign he understood what he had done was wrong. Just a small boy leading a group of grown adults to a body like it was the most normal thing in the world. That image, a child casually pointing the way to his victim, is what turned this into an international story. He's often described as the youngest serial killer ever recorded. But here's the honest part, and it matters. The documentation on this case is thin. Key facts, including his exact age and the precise dates, differ from one source to the next. There was never the kind of detailed forensic record or court file that exists for the other cases on this list. So treat it as widely reported, rather than firmly proven. What's consistent across the reports is the chilling calm. Because he was so young, he couldn't be imprisoned. He was placed in a children's facility, and reports suggest he was released years later. Where he is now, nobody seems to know. A boy who couldn't yet spell his own name led a search party to a body, and then the record around him simply goes quiet.